Good morning. Sir, first of all, congratulations to all of you for coming to the right hotel this morning. Nice work. Doesn't always happen, so we appreciate that. My name is Greg Reedman. I am president of your Chamber of Commerce, the Charles River Regional Chamber, and I really appreciate having all of you here today, bright and early, for what we hope will be a really interesting morning. We have three things that we're going to do today on our program, and not in this order, but first we're going to talk about a really big challenge that is infringing on virtually everything we do, which is housing and the challenge of housing and how important it is for us as a business community to be involved in that conversation. We're also going to talk and look forward a little bit, but we're going to talk with four different representatives from different segments of our economy about how we move our economy forward, both locally in our region and across the state. And we're going to honor a really good friend and thank her for her service. So that's our basic agenda today. But first, a few welcomes. Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities Ed Augustus is with us this morning. Mr. Secretary, thank you. All right, so Mr. Secretary, you should know the last time we did a big breakfast sit down, we had Rich Gotham as our speaker. He's the president of the Celtics. Rich came up and said he guaranteed this was going to be a good year for the Celtics. He told us that in the fall. Right. So I would recommend you come up here and guarantee this is going to be a good year for moving housing forward, because that's would keep the trend going here. But we're really grateful to have you here and as part of this. State Representative Denise Garlick is with us. Representative, always a pleasure. I believe we also have Norfolk County Sheriff Pat McDermott in the audience this morning. We have representatives from all four of our chamber communities in full force. Mayor Fuller is here, along with the City Council President Laredo, Councilors Albright, Krinsman, Humphrey, Milkey, and Bixby, I believe, are all here at that table sharing it with some of the other colleagues, along with Barney Heath and members of the planning staff. In Needham, we have Select Board Chair Keene and Select Board Member Cooley, along with Deputy Town Manager Katie King, Reg Foster from the Needham Housing Authority, and other folks in the planning department and active in Needham. The always engaged Watertown City Councilor Vincent Piccarelli is with us. As I like to say, one of my 9 favorite Watertown City Councilors with us this morning. And though, however, a big hand because Wellesley wins the prize. We've got a full table of Wellesley folks this morning. Chair Tom Wolfiger is here. Select Board members Frank Only, Sullivan Woods, along with Planning Director Eric Albine, and I believe Megan Jopp is here as well at the Wellesley table. Where are you? Wellesley table? Oh, there you go. Okay. Thank you all very much for being here, and let's give them all a round of applause. And then just a couple more things. The amazing Bob Rivers is in the house. Thank you, Bob, so much. I've had Bob Rivers, Chairman and CEO, Eastern Bank. I've had a great privilege of working with Bob pretty closely on a project to engage businesses and chambers across the state in the housing conversation. And Bob, I really appreciate bringing us to the table and your leadership there, and the fact that every day you put yourself out on issues that matter, housing and childcare and MCAS and all these other issues. So really grateful for that. Eastern Bank is also the sponsor of our event today. And thanks to Glenn Rosengard and his team from Eastern, who are all here today. We're really grateful for Eastern's support, its presence in our communities, shared commitments to a lot of the challenges that we work on together. So thank you, Eastern team, for being here this morning. And then just to mention a couple other sponsors, Boylston Properties, I think are over there. Thank you very much, Boylston Properties. They have a really important project that's before the city of Newton right now on Craft Street that would bring about 60 deeply affordable housing and other much needed apartments there. And we hope that that moves forward, and appreciate Boylston fighting hard to bring affordable housing into our community. Our good friends from InSource Services are with us today. Bruce and your team, thank you so much for your support. And the residential real estate team, or the real estate team from Essen Susel, are here with us today, and we appreciate their support as well. And then I just want to acknowledge two other sponsors that are important to us for their yearly annual support. Our friends at Needham Bank are here, and also the Village Bank. So thank you very much. Now, Joe DeVito is here from the Village Bank, and I didn't talk to you about this earlier, Joe, but if you remember, and you were here last spring when we honored Joe Prestigion from Cabot's, and he was getting ready to transition away from that business a little bit, and he brought ice cream for all of us, right? Now, Susan Paley, we're honoring her today. Did you bring money for us all or whatever? So, but I mean, the truth is that the Village Bank brings money to every nonprofit and cultural activity in the city of Newton, and has done a remarkable job being that dependable thing. And I think we all should, if you pause for a minute, every time you see, whether it's Village Bank or Eastern Bank or Needham Bank or any of the other people who are in this room, their name sponsoring an event, you should know both that organization worked really hard to get that support, and that also it's really critical to them. So please do your business with the businesses that support us. It's so really essential to do that. Today we are going to honor Susan Paley and Mayor Fuller. I'm sorry, but I always thought that Susan Paley has the best job in Newton, right? Maybe you have the second, maybe that's me, I don't know. But Susan Paley has had the best job in Newton for 14 years. She's led the philanthropic efforts to help make those decisions. And the thing about Susan you should know is she didn't just do this and hand out money. She was really, really good at her job. She's thoughtful, she's kind-hearted, but she's also really tough. And people had to really make sure they justified how they were spending their money if you wanted to get support from one of our institutions. So, and she was everywhere. She is everywhere, right? At every gala, every street fair, at food pantries, at cultural events, on event committees. She was chair of the chamber board at one point, a member of our board of directors, and so on and on and on. She was really omnipresent. So, and on behalf of all the nonprofits and all of us, first, our thanks to Susan Paley, and then we're going to welcome Gloria Gabris to represent the nonprofits to say a few words about Susan. Gloria is a past board chair of Newton Community Pride and also the West Suburban Y, and also actively involved in this stuff. So Gloria, please come forward.
So I'm honored today to represent Newton's nonprofits and recognize Susan for her unwavering commitment and passion she has provided us in her role as Village Bank Senior VP of Community Relations. Newton's nonprofit community is large and diverse. I reached out to several of them to ask how Susan has made an impact. And the stories and adjectives all have a constant theme. Susan is unifying, caring, a good listener. She's inexhaustible, a catalyst for good, the champion of the underdog, passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's feisty, always ready to listen and always ready to help. For 17 years, Susan has been the steadfast champion for numerous nonprofit organizations which have thrived because of Village Bank's generosity. Through Susan's steadfast advocacy for local nonprofits, she has played a critical role in enabling them to fulfill their mission, to extend social services, hold festivals, expand youth programming, extend scholarships, deliver arts education, feed the food insecure, and so much more. A thriving nonprofit sector is the backbone of any healthy community. Nonprofits fill voids that government resources and the private sector simply cannot. And nonprofits do it by leveraging every donor dollar with a genuine commitment to make their communities a better place to live. But the work of nonprofits is not possible without the support of donors and passionate advocates like Susan Paley in leadership roles. She is tireless and thoroughly enjoys what she does, and it shows. In any given week and months, she is attending events, festivals, galas, village days, nonprofit board meetings. Her advocacy is the fuel that keeps these organizations humming along, allowing them to grow and expand their mission and impact. Susan, the nonprofit community, along with countless individuals and families whose lives have been positively impacted by your support, offers you our heartfelt gratitude. Your role at the Village Bank has been transformative to so many, and our community is stronger because of it. On behalf of all the nonprofits to which you have given so much over the years, we will miss you. And we offer our deepest thanks for your friendship, advice, time, and support that you have given us. Please join me to show of your gratitude with a warm welcome and applause as we welcome Susan Paley to the stage.
So, between Greg and Gloria, I really have nothing left to say. No. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Gloria, for this kind recognition. Today marks the end of my 44-year career in banking. It's amazing to think about the changes that the industry has seen. The bulk of my career was spent in commercial lending, mortgage lending, and credit administration. I have seen banks come and go. I've witnessed the industry's commitment to small local businesses rise and fall. But the important role that community banks have played in our local economy has remained constant. I could not be more proud than to say that the last 17 years spent at the Village Bank have, without question, been the highlight of my career. Working here in the city of Newton, where I was raised and I still choose to live, it's been an incredible experience serving as a liaison between the bank and the city, getting to know the nonprofits that make our city tick, that fill gaps in our society, the ones that bring joy and beauty to the ones who live, work, and play in Newton and the surrounding communities, and that connect those experiencing hardship with the generous helpers amongst us. I've had the pleasure of serving on several city boards and committees and on the boards of numerous nonprofits. And this is all going to continue because it's just the way that I choose to live my life. I often describe this as my dream job, and that's not an exaggeration. Through it, I've gotten to know some of the most dedicated, passionate, mission-driven people among us. That they are the heart and soul of our communities. These are our civil servants, our police, our firefighters. These are our nonprofit executives and volunteers. I've also been blessed with an abundance of coworkers who are generous with their time, their energy, their enthusiasm, and their talents. And make no mistake about it, our village volunteers are the best. I'm not sure if the bank attracts a certain generous sort of person or if we kind of convert them once we get them into our bank, but they truly are the best. So I just have a couple of parting words. And number one, I would encourage everyone to volunteer and give back, and remember that life is not a spectator sport. Number two, collaboration and partnerships are key to building strong and compassionate communities. I'm proud of the connections I've forged amongst our nonprofits. Number three, change is hard and it can be intimidating, but it can't be stopped. Newton is not the same as when my parents moved here in the 50s or when I was growing up in the 60s. But hey, the world is just not the same. So embrace change, have courage, and always do your best to get to yes in my backyard. Our city must move forward smartly and with kindness and respect. Number 4, to quote our chamber, support local, shop local, dine local, enjoy the full and rich local arts and culture scene. You don't always have to fight the Boston traffic to get really wonderful and enriching cultural experiences. And of course, bank local. I want to thank Greg and everyone at the Chamber for this honor, thank my coworkers at the Village Bank, my friends in the nonprofit world and city government, and my husband Marty for always being with me out and about in our community and for graciously saying, "You're welcome," when he is thanked for the bank's generosity. And lastly, to Joe DeVito, President and CEO of the Village Bank. Joe, your leadership, your unbridled enthusiasm for our city, our bank, and our Village Bank family, and your friendship have made the Village Bank an exceptional place to work. Thank you all.
Good morning, everybody. My name is John Rufo, and I'm the board chair of the Chamber. And I have 2 quick orders of business and then 1 introduction for you this morning. First of all, it's our tradition at the spring breakfast and the fall breakfast to recognize our board members and thank them for their service. So anyone who's a current board member who's here today, can I ask you to stand to be acknowledged? Thank you. And if you can remain standing or not, but anyone who is a previous board member, if you could stand as well, that'd be terrific. Great, thank you. So you might ask yourself, what does the board do? We do all the work and then we give Greg credit for it, typically is how it works. But, no, just kidding. What Greg does is just amazing. But for example, one of the things we do is help to formulate the strategic plan. And I just wanted to reiterate our 5 areas of focus on the new upcoming strategic plan, which is housing, diversity, equity, and inclusion, workforce and daycare support, mitigation of climate change, and transportation. So these are our 5 focus areas, and we'll be, as we articulate our strategic plan in the coming months and put it out there, and we want to hear from all of you about that as we do it. Okay, second order of business is I wonder if you knew that Mount Auburn Cemetery has an artist in residence program and is a chamber member. You might not even realize that or know that. I grew up bird watching at Mount Auburn Cemetery and just loved it as a kid. This is all to say that we just formed an arts and culture committee on the chamber, and I'm going to be co-chairing that. With Emily O'Neill of the New Arts Center, and we've got 4 or 5 members from each community represented, and we want more. So if you're a nonprofit or a sole practitioner artist, or frankly, if you're just a member of the community that's really interested in the role of arts and culture in our economic and cultural community, we'd love to hear from you, because this is something that when my chairmanship ends in 6 short months from now, I tend to focus on the arts and culture piece of it. So you'll hear more about that, and you've already heard a lot about it this morning. So again, reach out to us. And then finally, the introduction. Bob Rivers, who you've already heard a little bit about this morning, is the president and CEO and chair of the board of Eastern Bank, which is the largest commercial bank headquartered in Massachusetts. He's regularly recognized for championing diversity and social justice, and is regularly named among the top 10 most influential people in Boston. A Needham resident for many years, he raised his family here, and I'm personally leading an effort to try to get Bob to move back to Needham. And he's a longtime friend of the Chamber, and Eastern Bank is today's event sponsor. So please help me in welcoming to the stage Bob Rivers.
Well, John, thank you for that. Appreciate the introduction. I also want to thank both you and Greg for donning blue shirts and orange ties this morning. As you can see, I only could get myself halfway there on this humid Friday, but it is great to be with you here this morning and have an opportunity to participate in today's program. I want to first acknowledge Greg. And Greg, I appreciate your kind remarks, and you know it goes both ways. As I travel eastern Massachusetts, southern coastal New Hampshire, really throughout Eastern's footprint, we have the pleasure of working with so many leaders of different business associations. And I have to say, and it's not just because I'm standing here, Greg knows this, and I've said this to so many people, Greg is one of the finest leaders of a business organization anywhere I've ever been. And he does that in a lot of ways, but I'll say one way that he really does it that has always made an impression on me and really led us to form a closer relationship was his regular blogs that you see over email. They're always so thoughtful and insightful and well done and on point, because he's constantly raising important issues and really elevating the dialogue. When I think of issues that I've leaned into, whether it be housing or MCAS, as Greg mentioned, I will tell you that a lot of that inspiration came from reading Greg's work and really pointing out to things that I was not aware of or really crystallizing them in my mind. So again, thank you for that, Greg, really on behalf of not only this region, but really across the Commonwealth. You really have a tremendous impact. And when you think of those various issues, the various issues that we are challenged with here in the Commonwealth and that represent opportunities for us, I would argue that the most foundational of those is housing. Yes, early child care is important, and you know we've stepped out on that. And there are many other competitiveness issues, such as transportation's a big one. But no, when I'm in any conversation, the foundational issue always comes back to the housing or the lack of it. And so I'm really delighted that Secretary Augustus could be here this morning to really lead the charge on this, because this is going to need all of us. As I think back over the last several years, some of you may recall that the seeds of the housing crisis in which we're in the midst of today actually began as we were coming out of the Great Recession or the Great Financial Crisis in 2009. Housing production was pretty robust up until that point and really fell off here and everywhere at a dramatic level. So even then, I will tell you back 10 years ago, the housing conversation wasn't nearly what it was and should have been today. But I will tell you that it did come up. And I remember sitting in a meeting in Boston, one of those normal chamber kind of discussions that you might have over dinner or over cocktails, and the subject of housing came up. And some of you might remember an undersecretary in the Patrick administration, Katie Stebbins, was there. And she basically looked at all of us, folks that look like me, and said to me, if you all really care about housing, go home. Go home. Get involved in your town politics, your town meetings, the planning board. Get to know the select board. Get to know the people that represent your community who actually make the decisions, because sitting here in a room in Boston and talking about it, you're not doing a darn thing about it. And I didn't act on it then, but I thought about it more recently as I was listening to Secretary Augustus at a meeting when he first came on board, talking about the housing bill and how important it was for all of us as business leaders to get behind it. And what did we all do? Of course, we all agreed. We nodded dutifully. We said, right with you there, Secretary. And then we walked out of the room and did nothing. And I said, that's what happens every single time. Because the reality is, at least for me, as someone who, as you heard, raised my kids in Needham and got up to beat the traffic and got out the door by 5:30 and often didn't return until at least 7 o'clock at night, I didn't know who was on the select board here. I didn't know who the process was. So telling me this is what you need to do in terms of getting involved, I didn't have the first clue. And what I thought was, well, I think we need to train the trainer for this. We need to really instruct all of us in the business community, people like myself, in terms of how does this process work and how do we get involved and lean in? When I thought about how we might do that across the Commonwealth, I started with Greg. Not only does Greg sit in the heart of really MBTA communities and really driving those new housing proposals, but I also knew Greg, his spirit, his leadership, and went out to him and said, gee, Greg, what if we did this idea? And thankfully, because of Greg's leadership and the work at Rachel Heller and others at CHAPA, we're really bringing that to life and now taking that across the Commonwealth to really teach people through chambers on how to get involved in your individual communities and really drive the housing initiative forward. Of course, the goal of all of this, as Susan said, and congratulations, this is all about yes in my backyard. So what we're trying to do is really rally and better organize and resource the YIMBY groups as much as the NIMBY groups. And it's critically important at this moment, certainly as business leaders, we have to join the YIMBYs. As you well know, this is a matter of talent, attraction, and retention here in this community and throughout the state. We have record job openings, and they're not getting filled because so many folks are leaving the state because they can't find an affordable place to live. For Main Street businesses, it's critical in terms of continued downtown traffic. As residents, we need to join the YIMBY team because our Main Street businesses drive the economic and cultural vibrancy of our communities. It was interesting as we were doing some of the work here in Needham as part of the Train the Trainer initiative. What we realized was the most powerful voices in that discussion in the business community weren't mine. They're not looking for some corporate leader from somewhere else to come in and talk about housing. They wanted to hear from the French press. They wanted to hear from Nichols and Shoes. Those businesses that are in town, ingrained in the community they really love. And again, their vibrancy, continued vibrancy, is critical because we need to build more housing. Now again, without this growth, our cities and towns are going to stagnate. And I think this is one of the things that NIMBYs don't recognize. If we keep everything the same, we're not going to grow. And the costs are still going to rise of all the public and safety services that we need. So the per capita cost is actually going to rise if we do nothing. It actually will fall per capita if we actually lean in and do something. When you think of those critical public service and safety services, think about our fire departments, our teachers, our police officers, who increasingly cannot afford to live in our community and are driven further out, and they're harder to fill those positions. And we as parents and grandparents, let's face it, I think many of us would like to have our kids come back from college and live nearby in our communities, but they just can't afford to do so. So in short, fully addressing our shortage of workforce housing is not only a matter of economic competitiveness, but I think it's even more importantly a matter of the health and desirability of places like Needham, Newton, Watertown, and Wellesley, and beyond as great places to live, learn, play, and raise a family. Not having enough housing affects all of us, and therefore requires all of us to go home, where ultimately decisions and actions happen, and get involved. So without further ado, I'd now like to introduce Massachusetts Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities, Ed Augustus. And as the Secretary is coming up, you should, I think as you well know, Ed is the first person in this role in Massachusetts in 30 years. And I think it really called out the Healy administration's recognition of the importance of singling out housing out of just the economic secretary role and really providing a focus on it. And we couldn't have had anyone better. I think many of you know of Secretary Augustus's reputation. He's one of the main people that revitalized Worcester. Now, many of you have been going to Worcester for a long time. It's a city I really love. In fact, there was a certain acquisition we didn't do several years ago that I've forever regretted because you could see the seeds of it coming, and so much of it was from Ed's work. Through all kinds of focus and programs, he built thousands of units of housing in that community. I think many of us go there today because of the Woo Sox, right? and the new stadium at Polar Park. And that wasn't just about a baseball stadium. It was about redeveloping the Canal District in terms of housing, restaurant, retail, and really putting Worcester on the map as an attractive place to be. Ed is a longtime servant to our public in so many different roles. Before he served as city manager in Worcester from 2014 to 2022, he was the director of government and community relations at the College of Holy Cross. He's a state senator. He's chief of staff to Congressman McGovern, chief of staff to an assistant secretary under the President Clinton's administration. And just before he took this role, he was serving as the chancellor of Dean College. So again, he's done a whole lot for us for that. Ed, we really appreciate it. It's delightful to have you here.
Thank you, Bob, for that generous introduction. And folks, that's what leadership looks like. That's what a corporate leader who cares about his community, has vision, looks like. So I want to thank Bob for his leadership. Susan, congratulations. Wish you a very happy retirement, and thank you for the way you've impacted these communities, and I know you'll continue to do that. Greg, it's been said by some of the previous speakers how impactful Greg is, how effective Greg is at representing the interests of the chamber member organizations. He has been a go-to for us in the Housing and Livable Communities Secretariat, but also the Healy Driscoll administration. He's somebody we rely on as a steady, thoughtful advisor when it comes to creating public policy. So we appreciate Greg's leadership and friendship and support. It's great to be here with Mayor Fuller, another great partner who's been with us every step of the way, no matter what the issue or challenge is. She's always there, so thank you, Mayor Fuller, for that. I want to just also say thank you to all the businesses and organizations in this room for what you've done. This chamber in particular has been a leader on MBTA communities and really championing the importance of that law and the potential impact of that law on creating more housing that is desperately needed, as we heard, as I'll talk a little bit about this morning. You were really early adopters, recognizing that housing and business have a symbiotic relationship. They need each other. We need more business leaders like yourselves standing up for housing, because the crisis we find ourselves in today threatens to damage the vibrant economy we've built for ourselves. I want to start out by telling you about a 24-year-old college grad my office recently heard from, because I think her experience highlights the challenges we face right now. This young woman went off to college and then moved back home with her folks so that she could save money while finishing her graduate degree. That was 2 years ago. She got her education, found a good job, but she's still living at home because she can't find a place that she can afford. Quote, "I did everything we were told to do. I prioritized my education and found a high-paying career, and still, it's not enough. I make too much to qualify for assistance and too little to actually be able to afford housing." Now, this woman's story might be simply unfortunate if it was unique, but it's not. There are thousands like her right now in the greater Boston area. We're in danger of losing bright young people like this. How long before people like her decide maybe Massachusetts just isn't a place they can afford to live? And it's happening already. People ages 26 to 35 are the largest group leaving our state. That's our workforce. That's our future. If you are someone who was fortunate enough to have bought a home 20 or 30 years ago, it might be tempting to think, well, at least it doesn't impact me. Well, I can tell you, if you spent 4 or 5 hours in an emergency waiting room with a loved one or yourself, you can thank the housing crisis for that wait. Or if you've gone to your favorite restaurant and found out the hours are now reduced from what they used to be, you can thank the housing crisis for that. If your children are in their 20s or maybe even in their 30s and still living at home because they can't find a place on their own, a housing crisis has impacted you. We are all in this together. And it's no wonder they can't afford it. The median rent in Needham is $3,575 a month. That's if you're fortunate enough to find a place. The median home sale price was $1.5 million in both Newton and Needham, and $2.2 million in Wellesley. People are being priced out. The system is broken, but we can do something about it. And we were very pleased this week to see the House of Representatives pass a version of the Affordable Homes Act that the governor had filed back in October, and I want to thank Representative Garlick for her support of that legislation. We really appreciate that. We're looking forward to continuing to work with the legislature to get this bill to the governor's desk. The House version looks to add an additional dollars, nearly $2 billion, to the $4 billion of investment that Governor Healey's bill proposed. And it retains many of the key policy proposals by the governor, like accessory dwelling units as of right. These are sometimes called in-law apartments or granny flats. Allowing ADUs as of right is the easiest way to gently add more housing. We estimate that between 8,000 and 10,000 units of housing can be created across the state in the next 5 years just with this one policy change alone. 5 other New England states have already allowed for the conversion of a basement or garage to create more housing. In many cases, the result is invisible from the outside. What a difference that apartment makes for a young professional just starting out, or for an aging homeowner who wants to stay in their home and needs a little extra income. And it doesn't cost the taxpayer a dollar. How often do you hear that? The Affordable Homes Act will help us jumpstart housing production, and that's what we need to do. The age-old economic principle of supply and demand has landed us where we are today. Increasing our housing supply will put us back on track. I'm not sure if folks realize that back in the 1980s, Massachusetts was building about 30,000 new homes a year. Since then, production has been cut nearly in half, but the demand has not. Too little building, high cost of construction, high interest rates, and restrictive zoning have conspired to give us the housing crisis that we are in today. When something is in short supply and high demand, prices rise. And we need to make sure that we're able to build housing where we need it most. The MBTA Communities Law does that. For half a century, communities have been zoning themselves into a corner, squeezing out multifamily housing that was once predominantly built here in Massachusetts. What we've done is build communities where DPW workers, the barista, your child's kindergarten teacher can't afford to live in town. Instead, we've been hoping that some other community would provide the housing that they need. Think about that for a minute. I say this all the time. 3 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic, all the folks who cleaned hospital rooms and nursing home rooms, the folks who checked us out of the grocery store or the pharmacy, we called them heroes. How about creating a place for those heroes to live in each one of our communities? Those are the people that you want in your community. These are the people that you want to call home, and you want them to be able to live in the community that they work in. The MBTA Communities Law looks to set this right. It looks at communities that have public transportation within reach and requires them to establish multi-family zoning districts. We need more of every kind of housing, but we are in dire need of multi-family housing. And I'm encouraged this morning because all of the Charles River Chamber communities are having the tough conversations and debates and working to comply with the law. However, we've had a few communities that have not adopted the zoning and have received a lot of the headlines this spring. But what you may not have heard is that 71 communities have now adopted the zoning in response with the MBTA communities law, with an 85% success rate. So 85% of the zoning changes that have been brought to town meetings or city councils have passed. That's pretty good batting average. These conversations are happening at our planning boards, at our town meetings, and are often lively, and sometimes they even get a little contentious. But that's democracy. These conversations are important, but these conversations should also be based on fact. So I'd like to arm you with some facts that I think are useful when talking about what the MBTA Communities Law does and what it doesn't do. First, the law does not eliminate single-family zoning. It requires communities to include multifamily zoning, not eliminate single-family homes. I hear over and over, quote, "Our community is unique." Every community has unique characteristics. That's why the task of creating these multifamily districts falls to the communities. They decide where these zones are within their communities in order to comply with the law. That's partnership. That isn't an option. What isn't an option is doing nothing or ignoring the law. We all must do our part, and it is the law. The law was passed more than 2 years ago with bipartisan support in the legislature, signed by a Republican governor, and it had the kind of support that because everyone knew it was the right thing to do. Here's another one I've heard. Multifamily housing will overrun our schools and cost our towns more money. School enrollment across Massachusetts has been in decline for 20 years. People are having fewer children or waiting longer to have them. In fact, in districts with declining enrollment, it can often be a way of holding the line on school funding from the state, which is based on the number of children enrolled. Some have pointed to the total number of units allowed under new zoning and claiming that towns can't handle it. They mention traffic and water and sewer. The fact is, as much as we need the housing right now, this will not all be built tomorrow. We haven't changed the laws of gravity. The MBTA Communities Law makes it possible to build it. It doesn't solve our other housing woes that we talked about earlier. But we can't build anything if we don't zone for it. That's step one. We have to get our houses in order. And the one I hear all the time, it will ruin our town's character. Let me tell you, in the last year as housing secretary, I've traveled more than 11,000 miles across the state, crisscrossing the state back and forth from the Cape to the Berkshires. We live in a beautiful state. And I've seen multifamily housing we're building today. It enhances a community. In Northampton, I visited a former state hospital property that is new home to multifamily housing, single-family housing, mixed-income housing, and it even includes senior assisted living and co-housing. All of that is set amidst rolling fields, open space, and woods. It's chock full of character. But consider also what multifamily housing can do for our town and village centers. Bob alluded to this. Former office parks and empty office spaces in our downtowns, right here in Greater Boston. How about a downtown where people live, work, eat, and frequent our businesses? Housing can revitalize downtowns. Housing is economic development. Housing gives your employees a place to call home in your community. If we do nothing, it will get worse. If we do only a little, we will be here in 5 years talking about the same problems. No, we need to go all in on housing. Building more housing will strengthen our state's economy. Our analysis of the administration's housing strategy shows that that strategy will create billions of dollars in economic benefit to the state while creating thousands of new jobs. Those are good construction jobs, but there are also jobs in engineering and real estate, lending and retail. All of the industries that not only build housing, but support those workers. It will do all of that while making more of the housing we need. We're living in a housing drought. The critics of the governor's housing plan are like bad weather forecasters who never seem to get it right. The MBTA communities law won't do enough, they say. Only a few drops of housing. ADUs, by right, won't do enough, they say. Only a few drops of housing. The low-income housing tax credits won't be enough, they say. Only a few drops of housing. Drop after drop after drop. Well, don't look now. Those drops are adding up, and before you know it, it's raining. We need the rain. We don't need to do something to address the housing crisis. We need to do everything. And it's an existential threat that demands the full might of our ingenuity. I hope that you will continue to join me in saying we are part of the solution. The housing crisis is not only a Massachusetts challenge, but we are a state of innovators, and we will lead our way in overcoming it and building a state where we can all afford to live. Thank you very much.
We're going to open it up to questions. If you want to raise your hand, stand up, say your name and your company name before you ask your question. So any questions, raise your hand. Don't go all at once. Okay.
So again, thanks for the remarks, Secretary. They're terrific. So I'll ask you the question that I always ask myself, and I'm sure a lot of us here in this room as business leaders ask, which is, what can we do as business leaders to lean in? Because we can listen to your remarks and we get it, and we're motivated, and then we walk out of here and we go off to our lives. So when we walk out of here today, what are some of the things that we can do to support the housing bill and actually help some of those drops become rain?
I appreciate the question, and I think, honestly, the advice that Katie Stebbins gave you a number of years ago is exactly the right advice. Get on the planning board. If you have a representative town meeting, run for town meeting member. If you have an open town meeting, attend the town meeting, particularly when items regarding housing like MBTA zoning changes come up in your community. Participate in all of those decision-making boards that are the gatekeepers to the production or the lack of production of additional housing. But also, try to arm yourself and your employees and the people that you work with in your communities with some of the facts that I tried to share today. I don't want to get too political, but if you look not only at the local level but the national level, we have a lot of dialogue that isn't always informed by fact and reason. And we need a lot more light than we do heat right now around these issues. Good people can come together and they can reason together. That's the whole point of this New England democracy that we have with town meetings, where people could come together and figure it out because they had each other's self-interest in mind. And what we need to do is just bring facts to that, not scare tactics, not, oh my God, this is going to change the character of the community and all the things that I've heard and I mentioned in my remarks. We need to be able to rebut that with cold, hard facts. So we're making good decisions. When we make decisions that aren't based on truth and facts, we make bad decisions. And what does that look like? It looks like a housing crisis where your employees can't afford to live anywhere near where they work. I was down the Cape the last earlier part of the week. 30 to 50% of the Cape's workforce lives off of the Cape. Think about that for a second. If you're in Wellfleet or Brewster and you're trying to provide municipal services like DPW employees or preschool teachers and people, you're relying on folks coming to work every day, traveling over the bridges. First of all, if you can get people to do that, that's an awful lot to ask, particularly for some of the wages that are being offered. And then does nothing to advance our climate goals. And thirdly, we're finding people just can't do it or won't do it. And so you leave those positions unfilled, and you don't get those services that you need. Or if you go to the Cape this summer, you're going to find a lot of restaurants whose hours are shrunk down, or maybe the motel that you stay at, they only change the room every other day because they don't have enough staff to do that. And that goes right to the economy of the Cape, the lifeblood of the Cape. And this is happening across Massachusetts in every community. So we need to really, I think, arm ourselves with facts, share that with folks within your organizations, and show up. I've often said the world is run by those who show up. The world is run by those who show up. So if there's a planning board meeting and they discuss MBTA communities and there's 10 abutters show up and they say, we don't want it, maybe they don't have any good reasons other than they don't want any change, they're going to speak for however many people are in that community. 20,000 people, 30,000 people. That's a lot of power that we give to a handful of people who actually just show up. So I guess bottom line, just ask you all, show up.
One more question? Anybody has one more question? Okay.
Hi, Ann Mara-Lanza, Building a Better Wellesley. One of the policy initiatives that the House didn't take up is the real estate transfer fee, which I know is an important initiative from the administration. So I'm wondering, we've seen, and I think everybody's seen, that money, where's the money for the development? That was one of the ideas that came from the governor. Can you talk about why the real estate transfer fee is something the governor is pushing for, and maybe what we can all do to help the Senate understand why it's important and try to get it in the Senate bill?
Sure. So the way the governor proposed the transfer fee was property over $1 million that sold would have a 0.5, 1%, or 2% transfer fee that could be applied, but it was a local option. So a community could decide whether or not they wanted to do it. Some communities will decide not to do it. Some communities may decide to do it. It would be up to the communities. We estimated that if you modeled it out with a 1% fee, the three largest cities in the state, Boston, Worcester, and Springfield, would raise $75 million last year. That's $75 million going into affordable housing production or preservation in those local communities. And communities can act more nimbly than the state can oftentimes. We have to run big grant programs, review grant applications, make decisions, and award grants. Whereas if communities had this money, they could operate much more quickly. And this is particularly important as it relates to what they call naturally occurring affordable housing. What is naturally occurring affordable housing? It's that apartment building in town that maybe there's been a long-time property owner who keeps the rents relatively stable because he or she have had the same tenants for years and don't want to see a turnover. But there's no government participation in that, so there's no restrictions on those units. It's just reliant on the landlord keeping those rents relatively affordable. When those properties change hands, what we often see is somebody come in and say, oh my goodness, you can get double the rent. And they jack up the prices, and these folks now are in this housing market trying to find something that they can afford. The biggest increase in our homeless population in Massachusetts, which is about a 30% increase in individual homelessness, senior citizens. These are folks who are in their 70s and 80s on fixed incomes, who are living in a place that was affordable for a long time. The property changes hands, and all of a sudden, on that fixed income, they have no ability to absorb those big rent increases, and they're finding themselves living in a car or couch surfing or ending up in our shelters. We can do better in this state, and we think the transfer fee is an option that allows cities and towns to decide for themselves if those dollars make sense for them to use locally to try to fill those gaps and preserve some of that naturally occurring affordable housing. Maybe they need a new roof. You could use this money to pay for the new roof and exchange, get an affordability restriction on those units so they don't disappear and you don't displace those renters there. So we think it's an important tool. There's multiple steps in the legislative process yet to play out, and so we're still hopeful that the elements that the governor filed will be in the final bill.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary, and to the entire administration, which really has prioritized housing above everything else. We really appreciate it. And I want to, as we get ready to set up for the panel, the panelists could get ready. We're going to bring chairs up. Just want to note, adding to the comment that Bob made and the Secretary made, I understand, we all understand, it can be difficult talking about these issues because you don't want to alienate your customers. The recommendation I have is stay in our lane, make sure the public knows, your elected people know that this is about jobs and this is about keeping your village, your businesses vital. You don't need to sway into some of those other arguments. Talk about how important this is for employment and those purposes. Panelists, if you could please come up. While they're doing that, a couple notes. My thanks to the Needham Sheridan. Let's give them a nice round of applause for what they've done for us today. The Chamber staff for everything that they do, New TV for recording this, and of course, all of you for being here. We're going to go into our panel. Someone give me a drink of water, it'd be appreciated. We have the bios for the panelists in your program book, so I'm going to spare you the time. Thanks so much for doing that. But what I wanted to say was, we're not going to grow our economy in this community, in our communities, in our state, with any one way. We're not going to do it. It's just not one way. It's going to take many different things. And today, we have four representatives, some very different segments of the economy that don't typically share the stage. I don't think, Michael Bobbitt, you've been on a panel with Cleantech before, probably not. So, and that was the goal here. Although Michael and Kate have done some work together promoting travel and tourism and culture, really what we wanted to do was bring just four different segments of the economy together, areas you may not have heard much about or thought much about, and understand what they mean for our region and our communities and our state. So we're going to have Michael Bobbitt is the director of the Mass Cultural Council, but someone we know well, a good friend from his time as at the New Rep Theater as the artistic director. Just next to him is Kate Fox, the executive director of the Mass Office in Travel and Tourism. Dr. Emily Reichert is CEO of the Mass Clean Energy Center, formerly with Greentown Labs, and she's going to be talking about climate tech. And finally, on all the end there, Jason Hodges, the deputy director of Mass Tech Innovation Institute, who we've asked today to focus on something called Finntech, which may or may not mean anything to any of you, but we'll learn what that is. So, Dr. Reichert, I want to start with you. Help us understand climate tech, and give us a couple examples of companies that work in that sector, and then explain why Governor Healy's economic development bill is so betting big on climate tech. What does it all mean to us?
Well, thank you so much. Is this working? Yeah, okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me this morning and for raising up climate tech as a subject of interest here. And I believe it really should be, because as the governor has been saying over and over recently, this can be a real economic driver for the state. Specifically, we think about this in terms of what happened with the life sciences industry 15 years ago. So if you remember, there was a big investment. Governor Patrick invested $1 billion. Look where we are today. 18 of the 20 largest life sciences companies are based in Massachusetts. So that's really what we want to accomplish. Let me back up and talk a little bit about climate tech. So what is climate tech? Well, it turns out that there are some technologies that are already invented that you probably think about when you think about climate or clean energy. Solar, wind, offshore wind, those probably sound pretty familiar. But there's actually a whole bunch of other technological solutions that we need to address climate change. We need to think about the whole range of things that emit carbon. And what I mean by that is the gases that ultimately end up in our atmosphere and cause the issues that we are already seeing in our towns and cities with flooding, with coastal erosion. So how does this technology help us? So first, what is it? What it is all kinds of different ways through technology to reduce carbon emissions, as I said. So how can we do that? Of course, through reducing electricity, both in terms of efficiency and the electricity that we generate through solar and wind is a lot less carbon emissions, for example. We can also increase the ability of us to grow renewable power through having battery systems that can have the problem of intermittency basically solved for us. And that technology is actually already being developed in Massachusetts. The other areas that we really need to think about mitigating carbon emissions include manufacturing. Think about cement. Cement, believe it or not, makes up 10% of global greenhouse gases. The same thing with steel production. So those are major manufacturing industries that need carbon emission reduction. And we have companies in Massachusetts who are working on green cement and working on green steel. So those are a couple more examples. We need to decarbonize agriculture. We need to decarbonize the transportation sector. We have a lot of companies who are working on this in different ways in terms of EV transportation. Electric vehicles, I would guess that there's many in this room who already have electric vehicles. It may be hard sometimes to find that charging station that you are looking for. Well, there's a company in Massachusetts that is developing a portable charging solution for EV vehicles, kind of like how AAA shows up at your door. This would be the same thing for EV charging. And finally, the building sector. This is very relevant to our housing stock that was just discussed in detail by our secretary. This housing stock that we have today, a lot of it ranges in age from hundreds of years to recent construction that is currently being built. Now, due to a lot of regulations, new construction tends to be relatively low in carbon emissions. We're seeing new systems go in that are ever more efficient. Houses tend to be more insulated, but for older building stock, there's really kind of deep decarbonization, as they say, lowering carbon emissions, that needs to happen really across the board. And that's things not only like insulation, so reducing the amount of heat that's escaping from your home, but also heat pump technology, also induction stoves. We're moving towards electrifying every home and business, and that is a goal and a challenge that a lot of young companies in Massachusetts are working on.
Stop you there, and we'll come back to you, but thank you for that, Jason. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means for the region and jobs and everything. Jason, so I get that Finntech, I can now do almost my banking on my cell phone. And someone can now take credit cards if there's a small business on the credit, that same basis too, using an app. But help us really understand, what does Finntech mean, and how does it growing in Massachusetts? How are we trying to develop that?
Finntech is the technology you see, and we know some of it from early disruptors. We see some of it being adopted by our major institutional players. But if you back it out, it is really an innovation or service that makes transactions in the financial sector more efficient. And that is across the board, from the startups, the disruptors, to our institutional players. I think some of the leading companies in the state supporting growth of fintechs are Fidelity and State Street and MassMutual, as well as sort of incubators that are looking for the next generation of those ideas that can kind of transform information into better, faster, broader reach, hopefully reaching more broadly, more diverse audiences for all of our, all of the strength in our Banking sector, we still across the state have a number of people who are unbanked. And one of the things that happens is you're able to bring technology to reduce transaction costs, is you're able to bring more people safely into the system. In Massachusetts, we've seen a growth of about 700. We have about 700 businesses that kind of self-identify as Finntech. There's still some opportunity for pure Fintechs. I'm in the Chambers area, did a quick check yesterday on Crunchbase. So, your mileage may vary with those numbers, but, there's about 8 companies in the 4 towns that self-identify purely as Fintech. The good news is there were 180 that identified as financial services. So, I think those are the kinds of things that are driving our interest. Across multiple technologies, one of the things that we've become most interested in supporting in the state is applying new technologies to areas where we're already strong. So, we're already strong in financial services in the state. We have, I think state employment was about 185,000 people across the state in financial services. We're strong there. This is where we take the rest of our innovation and build on those strengths. And this is the kind of thing that we look at across sectors. So, I'm not really talking about AI today, but, when we think about where are we going to succeed in AI, it's applied AI in financial services, health services, life sciences. We're going to be a little less chat GPT and a little more sort of serious, robust next generation.
Okay, Kate, all right. We understand what travel and tourism is. We get that idea. We understand why people come from all over to be in Boston or the Cape. We even understand when they come to the suburbs, why they might go to Concord and Lexington. Help us understand what it means for our communities. What does travel and tourism mean for communities that people don't necessarily associate with travel and tourism?
I'll take this one. Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. It is great to be on a panel with people I don't usually hang out with, and it's great timing because we just hosted the Climate Tech Conference in Boston this week, which was the first annual, and it's tourism because people traveled to the conference and they booked hotel rooms and they went to restaurants, and so it's the connections between industries and tourism are very clear. You just have to see them there. And it's our job at the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism to increase travel to and within Massachusetts. And why it matters, wait, I have numbers and my phone just went to sleep. Why it matters to Watertown, Needham, Newton, and Wellesley is because it makes you money. The hotel local rooms taxes for quarters 1 through 3 in fiscal year 24 in these communities, you're up 14%. And for example, in Watertown, hotel revenue is generating more than $1.3 million in local option hotel tax. Needham is $1.3 million. Newton is $1.8 million. Wellesley has fewer rooms. They're just under $50,000. And so that's why tourism matters to the communities. And I do hear from people who say, oh, tourism, that's not something that we have to worry about. The trickle down and the indirect benefits of tourism go throughout the state. So it's making all of our communities a better place to live, work, and play when you have a tourism economy that's bringing people in to spend money on your arts and culture, to go to your museums, to dine in your restaurants, to stay in your hotels, and your short-term rentals, which are having a considerable impact on both our tourism industry and our housing issues. Tourism is, and we learned during the pandemic, tourism is a necessity, not just a nicety. I also like to point out that tourism across Massachusetts employs more than 131,000 people. Those are jobs you cannot export. Tourism is an industry that can only happen here. We bring 21 million people a year to Massachusetts because we are an authentic, interesting, unique, diverse destination with a thriving arts and culture community across the state, with great universities and colleges, and with businesses and industry that have conferences and meetings that bring people in. So that's why tourism is important. And one more really quickly, I know that we need to share the microphones, but I just want to say in Massachusetts, our tourism structure, we have the Office of Tourism at the state level. We have 16 regional tourism councils, and those function as your destination marketing organizations across the state. So these communities, your communities this morning, are part of Meet Boston, the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau, and you're adjacent to the Metro West Convention and Visitors Bureau. It's their job to do the marketing. So if you aren't engaging with your regional tourism council, and many local chambers are engaging with their RTCs as well, get to know them, because they are increasing awareness of all the things to do, places to stay, places to eat in your communities. And my last plug is for realtors. Get engaged with your tourism partners, because so many people, myself included, come to Massachusetts as a tourist, and then we move here and we buy houses and we build families. And so that connection between realtors and tourism is an important one as well.
Thank you. All right, Michael, I've followed you. We've known each other for many years. I've also followed the Mass Cultural Council for many years, more than any other director of that state agency. You have said, I want to talk to the business community. Tell us why we, the business community, need to think about arts and culture in a way that maybe we haven't before.
Great. First of all, thank you so much for all your support when I was at New Repertory Theater, and even the support you're offering now through the Chamber. Also, Susan, congratulations. Susan showed up when I was running a nonprofit theater with some checks, and I just love you for that. Thank you so much. If you don't know Mass Cultural Council, we are your state agency supporting the creative cultural sector. We are funded by the legislature, so thank you to Rep. Garlick. Also, thank you to everyone that pays their taxes. We're also funded by the state bond budget, some money from gaming tax, and a little bit of money from the feds. Mass Cultural Council, I just tell you, in Norfolk and Middlesex County, we invested last year more than $21.5 million, which is very exciting. Gloria wanted me to mention that we have a Cultural Districts program, which is a economic development tool. We do not have one in Newton, Needham, Watertown, or Wellesley, but Watertown is close. We're hoping to designate that soon, and I know Newton has started the conversation. Just to give you some numbers about the economic impact, we are a $28.6 billion industry in Massachusetts. That's 3 times the transportation industry. That's about 5 million more than construction, and it's on par with retail. 30% of the people that Kate talked about that come to Massachusetts come because of the attractions, which is pretty incredible. People that come to Massachusetts spend double what residents spend on the attractions, on lodging and housing. And then residents here also spend money on things like childcare. So it's important that we're engaged with this. I'm so excited about your Arts and Culture Committee, because that's going to show that arts and culture is an essential health and human service, just like parks and recs and stuff. I did want to tell you a little bit. Greg sent out an email a couple of weeks ago. There are a couple of initiatives that we're pushing. One is that we're trying to get employers to think about an arts benefit in their benefits packet, so that you can offer your employees this great wellness tool, either add it as an arts benefit or expand your wellness package. The research shows that people are not going to the gyms with the gym memberships that you're giving them, but they will go to theater, they will go to museums, they will take a dance class if you add that benefit. If anyone wants to know about it, please reach out to me. The second thing I want to tell you about, and this is again why arts and culture is essential to every single aspect of life in Massachusetts. About 4 years ago, we started beta testing this program whereby healthcare providers can prescribe arts and culture activities to their patients as a supplement or complement to medicine. Yes. The doctors love it. One of them said he felt like he was giving out Willy Wonka tickets. The other said he felt like he was prescribing beauty into people's lives. Patients felt great about it. So we had about 2,000 prescriptions written. The prescriptions are usually written for the patient and a guest, or the patient and their whole family. In about 3 weeks, we'll be announcing that in this nation, we'll be announcing the first private insurer doing coverage for these ARTS prescriptions with coverage from Medicare and Medicaid. Did you hear me? Private insurance covering ARTS prescriptions. This is going to help with mental health issues, physical health issues, and loneliness, which is a big part of it all. But arts and culture is here. It's a tool for everything. Forbes just put out a report saying that creativity is the #1 skill needed by the workforce. The #1. It has surpassed critical thinking and analytical thinking. To solve all the problems that we're trying to solve, like the housing issue we talked about today, we're going to need creative people. So arts and culture is here, and it's a huge economic driver.
Thank you. All right. So a question, I think this is for Emily and Jason, for if you're a real estate person, you own commercial property, or you're a municipal person trying to think, how do I get climate tech businesses to be in our footprint? What do they need? What are the actual requirements? Emily, we were at an event for Via Separations in Watertown, which recently moved into Watertown Square, in a building that was originally going to be a lab building, and they chose to be there. It had to, but really physically, what does climate tech need to be accommodated in our communities?
Yeah, so I think it makes sense to frame this in terms of the economic impact overall. And I had the reference to the life sciences industry, what we did really 15 years ago, investing in life sciences. The effect of that is that you end up having a lot of businesses that are growing here in the state. And as they grow, they need space. What we have to offer here in Massachusetts is the strength of our innovation base. We are very good. It's probably the best thing we are able to do here in Massachusetts. We are great innovators, and there's always innovation coming out of our universities, forming into companies. The question is, do those companies stay here and grow, or do they go elsewhere? And that is really what we're trying to work on in the administration in terms of making sure that we have resources to ensure that these companies have the opportunity to stay and grow here. So part of that is in what we call the Mass Leads Bill, and in there is capital funding specifically to invest in manufacturing, to invest in facilities like the one at Via Separations, to invest in equipment, to invest in decarbonization and demonstration projects. So the real opportunity here, I'd say, is catching the growing companies, helping them put down roots here in the Commonwealth, and thinking about how do you ensure that these folks feel at home in that community. I could see across the state climate tech communities, both from the perspective of the real estate side, but also I think there are going to be, and I already know there are, mayors out there, and perhaps in Newton, I know the Newton mayor is here because I met her earlier this morning, who want to be first up in testing new technology in the community. And so I think that there's multiple roles for communities to play. I think there's a role for the real estate industry to play, and there's also an important role for the banking industry to play. These are young companies that are going to grow, and the relationship you form with them at the time when they're getting their first funding, having that funding, which is probably in the often tens of millions of dollars by the time they get to a Series B round of investment and are doing the real estate move out of maybe the core of Boston, those companies are very bankable. And that is the opportunity as well.
Thank you. Let me go to Jason. So Jason, you mentioned 8 fintech companies in our 4 community footprint, but 140 something other financial services. It seems like a natural that more fintech companies would want to be set up here where the financing's happening. What do we do to attract those businesses?
I think, you're starting from, of the various technologies we support, this is one of the easier ones. You need office space and compute power generally, and access to other people. I think that's the other piece that we see across all of this. Across the overall sector, one of the things we learn through our work closely with the Mass Finntech Hub is that there's a high level of collaboration across sectors that within the financial services community. That's a real strength. I think you can harness that. You have institutional assets here who are generating, the next level of talent. Babson is teaching FinTech. If you're not connected with them, bringing projects for student capstone projects, find a way to do that. In some cases, if you have a couple offices down the hall that you're not using that you used to use 10 years ago that are kind of empty, can you set up a mini incubator? You don't need 30 people under one roof. In some cases, hosting a couple startups to be together, working with you in your space brings it forward. These aren't big labs. These are small pieces. If you're running and it doesn't just have to be in financial services. If you're in the software business, you may also have some empty space down the hall. Can you bring, FinTech's kind of interesting because it brings people who have kind of the finance background, a data background, along with sort of the coding background. But you can be in the FinTech sector without being purely in tech. But you need access to those tech people to help you take your idea. I think those are some of the starting points.
Thank you. All right, Kate. So I own a restaurant or a shop or a destination in one of our 4 communities. How do I get tourists to pay attention to that and not just always think they go from their hotel room to downtown Boston?
I got a mic. So there are several ways to, it's marketing, right? And you can do that for free or low-cost investment, and you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on marketing. If you are a small business on Main Street or downtown and you want to draw attention, then check your Google reviews. You can go to visitma.com, which is our website, and you should all go to visitma.com anyway. We've got lots of resources there, but you can add your business listing for free to our website. If you have tourism-facing events that you plan during the course of the year, you can add those to our calendar. It's free to create a username. It's free to join our insiders list and get our industry newsletters. We also, if you're a nonprofit or a community, we do grants. So join the industry newsletter. So be the insider that learns about the grant opportunities as they come up. And work with your regional tourism councils. Couple of other opportunities, TripAdvisor, locally based. Make sure your business has good TripAdvisor reviews, and TripAdvisor will help businesses to modify, respond to, answer reviews, and update your profiles on their platform. Same thing with Google. There are a lot of opportunities online in this digital world to make sure you're adequately and successfully promoting your small business. And a lot of people want to see those hidden gems. They want to get out of the primary, think about yourselves as travelers. If you go on vacation, you do the top things to do to check the boxes, and then you want to see, how do the locals live? What are the locals doing? And that brings you to main streets and engaging with the local artists, the local creative communities. Number one reason for coming to Massachusetts is the authentic experience, and that's what you get in the small towns.
Thank you. Michael, similar question. We love the MFA and the BSO and the Museum of Science, but how do we get people to come to our local arts institutions and engage deeper with them?
It's what Kate said. It's marketing. And it's also what, let me ask a question. How many arts organizations are in this room? A small portion. Hi, everyone. I love you all. I hope you're getting grants. But I think that's the thing. It's about including them in all the rooms where you're discussing what's happening in your community, because you're going to need those people there to help to creatively solve solutions. But secondly, there's so many lists out there where people are saying the top 10 reasons why they moved to an area, or the top 10 reasons why their businesses moved to the areas. And always in that list is arts and culture. So you got to include it as part of your everyday life and celebrate it and market it. All of you all in here that run businesses, join the arts arts boards, give them sponsorships to their events and such, put ads in their papers. When you're meeting new clients, grab that cup of coffee from the restaurant and then walk them to the gallery or to the museum in that area. Get to know them that way through arts and culture. There are just hundreds and hundreds of ways to integrate arts and culture into the regular life, and I think when we do that, we'll see more visitorship and more visibility of Newton, Needham, Watertown, and Wellesley arts organizations.
Terrific, thank you. All right, now let's bring it back home, or literally home, okay? We all heard from Ed Augustus. I mean, you all have great plans and how you know a roadmap for how to grow your sector and everything. What does housing mean to that? If we don't solve the housing crisis, what does it mean to your ambitions to be able to do that? I'll let you start this time, Martin.
I mean, I moved to Watertown, which is great, and I can barely afford the rent, and so it means a lot. It means a lot. I mean, the pricing is really ridiculous. I mean, we've got to fix this,
for artists and
they have such fickle income. It's just not going to happen if you want those vibrant scenes in your community. If you want proximity to that kind of creativity, we got to fix this. I mean, it's ridiculous. And one of the things I'm doing is trying to make sure I'm in all the rooms across state government to say that arts and culture is also suffering from these problems. Ed will tell you every time he's in a room, I'm there too, because these artists are couching it on each other's couches. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard. So we need to fix this problem.
Okay.
I think Secretary Augustus covered it. I mean, he gave the example of the Cape. People who work in tourism and hospitality at all levels have trouble affording to live in Massachusetts, and that impacts our ability to provide the services to the tourists we're inviting to come and spend their money. So we need affordable housing for the people who work in our industry.
Emily, you get all this money from the Economic Development Bill to grow climate tech. Can we do that without housing?
I would say that it gets much harder to do it without housing, because really what we're trying to do with these funds is keep companies here in Massachusetts. And the thing is, they want to be here. I hear this from founders of startups in the climate tech industry all the time. They love it here because we have a strong ecosystem. We have lots of investors. We have the universities. We have the startup community. But the problem is, and I have had a startup founder say this to me directly, the cost of housing makes it hard for folks to stay here, especially when there are incentive programs in other states, and other states are actively recruiting our companies. They are organized and they are saying, come here, cost of living is so much lower. And they're right. So it's a challenge, and what we think about doing with this bill, the Mass Leads Act, is trying to tip the balance a little bit with tax incentives as well as capital expenditure for this industry. And what I've heard from the Mass Life Sciences Center is that that little bit, we don't have the most money to give to folks relative to, say, a New York or a California, but that little bit can make the difference. And so it is worth investing in order to be able to keep more of these companies here in the Commonwealth.
Thank you. And Jason, speak not just about Finntech, but also with the mass innovation tech sector in general.
This is a challenge we see across the tech sector. You know, in financial services, I could argue the pressure maybe a little less because our competitors, you know, are New York, San Francisco, London, not exactly also known for their low costs of housing, but that's not it's not the place to be complacent because, you know, as was just noted, there are lots of people coming for us. And for across many of our tech areas, we've been largely complacent. We make some key investments, and we're very proud of the assets we have, the continual innovation engines we have in higher education, our amazingly talented workforce. But a lot of people want to get that now. And I think that's the piece that we see overall. Housing, it continues to be the challenge for us to retain people. We hear it from companies that are struggling to relocate. They're moving further west, sort of in, outside of finance, but If you look at the Amazon robotics facility in Westboro, deliberately designed to be within walking distance of the Westboro MBTA station because the young employees couldn't afford to live in Boston, but they could live further west on the Worcester line. These are so there is a synergy between all of this. You know, when the Secretary's talking about MBTA communities, it matters for our next generation to keep our tech economy growing.
Thank you. All right, we have 2 minutes left. Is there one thing each of you wanted to say that you wanted to tell us today that we didn't get a chance to hear from you? Kate, you want to go first?
Sure. I want to mention that the American Revolution started here in 1773 with the Tea Party. 1776 marks the semi-quincentennial of the American Revolution on a national level. We are standing up Massachusetts 250. We're going to have a huge campaign, domestic and international marketing, and we are looking for people to engage with this campaign. And it's not just reenactments and what happened 250 years ago. We want to know how we are all revolutionary and independent today. So put your thinking caps on and join us for Massachusetts 250.
Thank you. Emily, why don't you next?
Well, I'm betting everyone in this room thinks that we should do something about climate change. I would do a show of hands, but I feel like I don't need to do it. The thing that we, though, are able to contribute in Massachusetts is something that almost no other state can contribute, and that is our strength in innovation. So we want to build on a very strong base to grow the climate tech industry here. And I invite all of you to be part of that. Reach out to the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and there are many ways that you all can be involved in this, whether it's supporting, have supported over 6,000 interns with 600 businesses. So if you have a clean energy business here in this area, or you are looking for talent that is going to be motivated and excited because this generation wants to do something about climate, think of Mass CEC. Excited to work with all of you.
Thank you. Jason.
2 quick bits of promotion on my end as well. First, if you are a company broadly defining yourself in the tech sector, you have under 250 employees, we too have an intern program. I got a few more slots left for this summer. Would love to put some of those internships out to some of the chamber membership. You look at our website and find out more, or you're welcome to contact me directly and I'll help you through the process. Second thing is, if your interest is piqued in Finntech and you want to get your number up from 8, we're here to help. We have great partnership working with Mass Finntech Hub. Bob Rivers is on our advisory board for that. We would love to welcome you into those conversations to help us grow that sector statewide.
Michael, last word.
If you're an insurance company or a healthcare provider and you want to know more about the Arts on Prescription initiative, please see me. 2, the House's version of our allocation came in higher than the Senate's version, and so if you know anyone on the conference committee, tell them to do whatever Michael Bobbitt asks. That would be really great.
All right, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you all. Thank you to Eastern Bank for sponsoring and everyone else, but really thanks to all of you for being here and for your support to the Chamber every day, every year. We are really grateful. Have a great morning, everybody.